The rain had just begun to fall over the small town of Ridgewood, a sleepy place tucked between rolling green hills and silver streams that shimmered under the evening light. People hurried along the narrow streets, clutching umbrellas, eager to escape the chill that came with the storm. Among them walked Daniel Ross, his coat collar turned up, his face set in the same hard lines that had etched themselves there ever since his life had taken a turn 2 years ago. He used to be different, a man who smiled easily, who greeted strangers on the street, who believed in goodness. But when his small carpentry shop burned down and his insurance claim was denied, it wasn't just his business that was lost. It was his faith in people, in kindness itself. He had spent the last 2 years working odd jobs, keeping to himself, living in a small apartment that smelled faintly of sawdust and loneliness. That evening, as Daniel trudged through the rain, he saw her for the first time. A little girl, no more than 8 or 9, standing near the bus stop, soaked through despite clutching a faded red backpack over her head. She wasn't crying, but her lips trembled as she looked at the empty road, her shoes sinking into a puddle that reflected the dull orange of the streetlight. Daniel hesitated. The old Daniel would have rushed over immediately, asked if she was all right. But the new Daniel kept walking. People got themselves into trouble all the time, he told himself. It wasn't his job to fix it. Yet, a few steps later, he stopped. The rain was coming down harder now, hammering against his coat, and something about the way she stood there, so still, so small, gnawed at him. He turned back. "Hey," he called, his voice rough. "You waiting for someone?" The girl looked up, startled. Her eyes were wide, a deep brown that caught the glow of the streetlight. "I was waiting for the bus," she said, "but it never came. The last one's supposed to go at 6. Daniel checked his watch. It was almost 7. "You missed it then." She nodded slowly, her shoulders drooping. "I thought I could walk home, but it's too far. My mom told me not to talk to strangers." Daniel almost smiled at that, almost. "Your mom's a smart woman," he said. Then, after a pause, he added, "I live just a few blocks away. You can wait there until the rain stops. I'll call your mom, let her know you're safe." She studied him carefully, as if deciding whether he could be trusted. Then she asked softly, "Do you have a cat?" The question caught him off guard. "A cat?" "Yeah. Mom says people with cats are kind." Daniel chuckled for the first time in months. "No cat. But I've got a heater and hot chocolate." That seemed to do it. She followed him, her wet shoes squelching against the sidewalk. When they reached his small apartment, he handed her a towel and told her to sit near the heater while he made cocoa. "My name's Lily," she said as she rubbed her hair dry. "Daniel," he replied, pouring steaming milk into 2 chipped mugs. Lily smiled, a small, grateful smile that felt warmer than the heater's hum. "Thank you, Mr. Daniel." He handed her the mug. "You're welcome, kiddo." They sat there for a while, listening to the rain drum against the windows. Slowly, bit by bit, Lily began to talk, about her school, her best friend who loved drawing cats, how her mom worked late at the diner. Daniel listened quietly, surprised at how easily her words filled the silence he'd grown used to. When the rain finally eased, he offered to walk her home. It wasn't far, just a few blocks away, near the edge of town. When they reached a small, worn-down house with peeling blue paint, the door flew open and a woman rushed out, eyes wide with worry. "Lily," she cried, wrapping the girl in her arms. "Where have you been?" "I've been calling everyone." "I missed the bus, Mom," Lily explained. "But Mr. Daniel helped me." The woman looked up, her eyes softening. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling. "You have no idea how scared I was." Daniel waved it off. "Just glad she's safe." But before he could leave, the woman insisted, "Please, come in for a moment. At least let me give you something warm to eat." He wanted to refuse, He always refused such offers, but something in her tone reminded him of the days when kindness had flowed naturally between people, when neighbors looked out for one another. So he stepped inside. The house was small, the furniture mismatched, but it radiated warmth. The smell of soup filled the air, and the walls were lined with drawings, mostly cats, he noticed, and one of a man with a hammer, smiling beside a wooden bench. "That's supposed to be my grandpa," Lily said proudly when she caught him looking. He was a carpenter. He could build anything. Daniel's chest tightened. A carpenter, huh? Must have been a good man. The best, her mother said softly. He taught me that kindness is like wood, you shape it carefully, and it lasts forever. They ate together that night, laughing over small things. When Daniel finally walked home, the streets were glistening under the moonlight, and something in him felt lighter. He didn't know it then, but that evening had planted a seed, one that would soon grow into something far greater than he imagined. Over the next few weeks, he began to see Lily and her mother, Clara, more often. Sometimes he'd pass by the diner where she worked and wave through the window. Sometimes Lily would drop by his apartment after school with a drawing or a cookie wrapped in foil. One day, she showed up carrying a wooden birdhouse, half-painted and lopsided. "Can you help me fix it?" she asked. Daniel couldn't help but smile. "Sure thing." They spent the afternoon sanding, hammering, and painting until the birdhouse gleamed with bright colors. It reminded him of the joy of creation, the simple, patient rhythm of his craft. For the first time in years, his hands didn't feel empty. Clara began stopping by too, bringing leftovers from the diner. They talked about everything, the weather, old music, the dreams they'd both quietly abandoned. She told him about her husband, who had died in an accident years ago, leaving her to raise Lily alone. "You learn to be strong," she said one night, as they stood by his window watching the rain. "But sometimes, it takes someone's kindness to remind you you're not alone." Daniel didn't say it, but he felt the same. One evening, as winter approached, Clara came by looking worried. "Daniel, I hate to ask this," she began, "but the heater broke at home. I can't get it fixed until payday. Could we stay here for a night or two?" He hesitated only a moment before saying, "Of course." The next few days were filled with laughter and warmth. Lily turned his quiet apartment into something alive, drawing on scraps of paper, singing off-key songs, leaving trails of glitter wherever she went. Clara cooked meals that filled the space with comforting smells. One night, after Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, Clara turned to him. "You've done so much for us, Daniel. I don't know how to repay you." He shook his head. "You already have." She frowned slightly. "How?" "By reminding me what it means to care again," he said quietly. "I'd forgotten." She smiled then, a smile that reached her eyes, soft and real. "Sometimes, it just takes the warmth of an open hand." Those words stayed with him. A few months later, Daniel reopened his carpentry shop. Clara helped him design a new sign, Ross Woodworks, crafted with care. He hired a couple of apprentices and began teaching them not just how to build furniture, but how to build trust, patience, and pride in their craft. Lily often came by after school, her hands covered in paint, helping him with small projects. One day she said, "Mom says you fixed more than just wood, you know." Daniel laughed. "What do you mean?" "You fixed our hearts too." He was silent for a moment, touched in a way words couldn't express. "Maybe we fixed each other," he said finally. Years passed. Ridgewood changed, the old diner was renovated, new shops opened, children grew up. Daniel's shop became a small hub of life and learning. People came not just for furniture but for advice, for warmth, for stories shared over cups of coffee. And at the heart of it all was that one act of kindness, an open hand offered on a rainy night. One spring afternoon, Daniel stood outside the shop, watching the blossoms drift across the street. Clara came up beside him, holding 2 cups of coffee. "You know," she said, handing him one, "I think about that night often. How different everything would have been if you just kept walking." He nodded slowly. "I almost did. But you didn't," she said, smiling softly. "And that's what matters." Lily, now a teenager, came running down the street, waving a letter in her hand. "I got it," she shouted. "I got into art school." Clara's eyes filled with tears as she hugged her daughter. Daniel watched, pride swelling in his chest. Later that evening, after the celebration had quieted, Daniel sat alone in his workshop. The tools glinted under the lamplight, and a half-finished carving lay on the table, a pair of hands, open and reaching outward. He traced the wood grain with his fingers, feeling its smoothness, its warmth. He remembered the man he used to be, the one who had lost faith, and the man he had become, the one who found it again, not through grand gestures, but through the smallest spark of compassion. Outside, the wind carried the faint sound of laughter from the house next door. He smiled to himself. In a world that often closed its fists in anger or fear, he had learned the quiet power of keeping a hand open. Because sometimes, that single act, the simple warmth of an open hand, could change everything. And though the years would continue to pass, though faces and seasons would come and go, Daniel knew that kindness, like well-crafted wood, was something that endured. Shaped with care, it didn't just build homes or furniture. It built hearts. He picked up his chisel once more, steady and sure, and began to carve.